Hello, my name is Nache from NacheSnow.com. I'm just going to talk to you guys a little bit about starting a podcast today. I'm not sure if you're on my website or looking at this video directly on YouTube, but please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's NacheSnow.com/YouTube. If you're not already on my channel, there should also be an option in this video somewhere, but if not, you can head on over there. Thanks for tuning in. I'm just going to talk to you guys a little bit about starting a podcast today. I did an article, and if you go over to NacheSnow.com/start a podcast, you will see the notes for this video over there, because really I'm just kind of recapping what I wrote on this video. But the number one question I get is how to start a podcast. And for those of you all who don't know me, I have two podcasts. The first one is called Can I Park Here? And that is where we interview, me and my co-host, Estrell Rouse, we interview mobile boutique owners or fashion trucks. And that might sound weird, but it's literally people who like gut out like a UPS truck or an old vintage trailer and sell home goods, fashion, you name it, out of a truck. It's like a fascinating industry. It's like over 400 in the US. But anyway, for the last couple of years, we've interviewed lots of folks that have taken that up as a full-time job and a side hustle. So this year, I wanted to do something different. I started a podcast called Studio 78, and it's really just interviewing people on their passions or like their side hustles, which doesn't always have to be the same, but it's like how they found it, like, or discovered it, how they built it, and what they're doing in order to like make money from it or not. Some people just have it as a passion project. But anyway, I just wanted to talk to, in particular, women who are out there doing their thing in the entrepreneurial space or even in corporate America, And then I wanted to like throw some lifestyle stuff in there, like eating healthy and mental health and all kind of good stuff. And so my first podcast was very niche. And so I needed to start a second podcast to just kind of do all the things that kind of are near and dear to my heart when it comes to passion, business, lifestyle, health, and wealth. All right. So anywho, so that's why people come to me and ask me about it, because I've started two. And the first one I think was very successful, and the second one I just started. So really I'm building that audience now. So you can help me by going over to iTunes and rating Studio 78 5 stars. But anyhow, I'm gonna make this a quick video today. If you go over to the article, I have like tons of links, but the most important link that I want you to click on is Pat Flynn's complete step-by-step podcast tutorial. So you might say, Nache, what are you doing? Why are you sending us to someone else's site to learn how to do a podcast? Because he does it so well. So if you head on over, I have a link to his tutorial. He has like 8 or so videos. I used those videos like 2.5 years ago, whatever it was, to start my first podcast, and it was exactly what I need, because he literally steps you through it. Like, it didn't make sense for me to replicate what he's done because he did it so well. And he goes over gear, software, he goes over hardware, he goes over his process, everything. But I also, in my article, include Shopify Blogs has an article called How to Start a Podcast, the Ultimate Step-by-Step Podcasting Guide. And when I read that, even after the fact, I thought it was pretty good. And Entrepreneurial on Fire also has a podcast tutorial. So my suggestion is look at all three, because they're all going to be slightly different with some of the same things, but maybe different hardware or software to consider. And really what you want to do is figure out like what's best for you. Also, some of the things that I think that you should think about before you even start a podcast is, will you have a co-host? Like, for me, thank goodness I had a co-host for that first podcast. Like, we were able to divvy up the duties, which was super duper helpful. The second podcast, I didn't need a co-host because I kind of had it down packed, thank goodness, because I had a co-host for the first one. That's not to say you need a co-host, but if you have somebody that's reliable and that you trust and you'd have fun doing a podcast with because you all share similar interests, it's something to consider. But you really want it to be somebody who you don't mind talking to like every day and who actually is going to put in the same amount of work as you. So really think about it before you commit, because things like this can ruin relationships. And then another thing to think about is like, are you going to do it interview style, or will the main focus be you? For me, I like doing it interview style, and then I sprinkle in some just episodes where it's just me talking. Some people have the podcast where it is just them talking, or some people have serial style podcasts where they have clips of audio from their day that they've kind of like weaved together with music. Like, you have to figure out what style you want and what you have time for, because if it's just you talking like I'm talking to you right now, that's a low investment. You can record it really quick and just put it up, right? But if you have an interview, you need to do just a little bit more work, maybe on the editing front. If you decide to have it a little bit fancier where you're editing or weaving multiple clips and audio into it, that's even more of a time investment. So really just think about what you have the capacity for and just what style you want your podcast to be in. Some other things: who's your audience? Because that'll help with marketing. What type of content will you cover? Like I said, specifically, the Can I Park Here is for fashion trucks and mobile boutiques. That's all we cover. If you don't like that, you will not like that podcast, right? It's about business when it comes, like, we might have a brick and mortar, but it's all about fashion and running a fashion business. Now, and then with Studio 78, it's very different. It's more about business, entrepreneurship, side hustles, and then women, health, wealth, well-being. It's more of a lifestyle podcast, right? So there's two very distinct audiences that go with that. And so that's something that you should consider. And then, think about how often you want to post an episode. For me, for both podcasts, I do once a week, and then I do also some breaks in between. Because we do it in seasons for Can I Park Here, and even for Studio 78. This is July right now, and I'm about to take my first break. So 31 episodes in, I'm going to take the month of August off and then start back up again. So that's something to consider. Also think about how you're planning to edit the episode. Some people just leave it raw and unedited. Really, it's a preference. Some people have intro and outro music. Some people have professional intro and outro. Think about kind of what you want. So for example, in the Can I Park Here, we went over to Fiverr, F-I-V, is it F-I-V-R, I believe? But anywho, we went over there and we had somebody record our intro for us. So our intro sounds a little bit more professional. For Studio 78 right now, I just kind of have it loose. Like, hi, this is Nache Snow. Welcome to Studio 78 podcast. So just think about just the the style you're going for, the mood you want to put people in when they hear your podcast. You want them to have this fully polished podcast that's edited with special intro, outro. How do you want it to be? Listen to like a ton of podcasts and kind of steal ideas. We already talked about seasons, how you promote an episode. Some of the articles that I mentioned already so I'm not going to get into it too much, like how to promote your episode and use like your current tribe, which if you're just starting out could be just friends and family, but hey, that's great. But I also, when you go over to the article, I have some articles entitled "We Didn't Know How to Promote a Podcast, so Here's All We Learned," and that's from Buffer. I've got in there how I got 100,000 podcast downloads in 62 days without a platform. That's from Fizzle. I just got a ton of relevant articles that can help you out. So I'm not going to go through all of them because really what you need to do is kind of read them, take notes, and when you launch your podcast, use that in order to really have like a good strong start. And even if you already started a podcast, still go back and read them, because maybe when you launch a new season you can use some of those tactics, or you could just kind of just start marketing your podcast just better, even if you're 2-3 seasons in. So check those out. Some other things to consider. How much time do you have to dedicate to producing a podcast? I'm pretty fast now, so usually on Saturday mornings I can get everything done. But, I edit my podcast. I do add, even though it's me doing the intro and outro for Studio 78, I've got to add music in there. I've got to record an intro and record an outro, add it into the audio and GarageBand. So, it takes a few hours to do each one of these episodes, to include like show notes and all that other good stuff, writing those show notes out when I post an episode. Some people do very robust show notes, some people don't. I try to have mine pretty robust just because I'm trying to make it accessible, so people can know what happened even if they can't listen to it. But also, and a lot of people pay for transcripts too. I'm not quite there yet, but that's another investment to consider. Do you want to pay somebody to can transcribe your audio so it's more accessible? But I do at least have the show notes. That also helps with SEO too. But it's several hours that I invest every week in order to make sure I get this show out at the same day every Monday. So just think about that. And also think about how you're going to start out. Like, iTunes is the way to go, but some people start out small and just, well, I wouldn't say small necessarily, but they don't feel like maybe going the iTunes route. They might start out with SoundCloud or YouTube, and then if they build an audience there, then they might go over to iTunes. So it just really depends on where your audience is and how wide you want your distribution to be. And then how much are you willing to invest? So we already talked about time a little bit, but it is time. If you do interviews, not only so I already talked about, let me just back up for a second, just the time to edit, which is like sometimes 2-3 hours if you have like a 45-minute long episode. If it's a shorter episode, it's shorter time. Like if you do 20 minutes, you might be able to edit that in an hour. But also, when you think of time, you have to interview people. So you got to send out emails, you got to schedule things, right? Really think about okay, do I have time to interview people? When will I interview people? Because all of that is a real time investment. And then money, right? How much money are you willing to invest? Depending on where you're hosting this, I use WordPress, so I pay for a premium theme to have a nice theme on my WordPress site. I gotta pay for hosting, which I use Bluehost. I use CoSchedule in order to shoot my podcast out to different platforms, so I don't have to worry about doing it. It does it automatically for me. How much do you want to invest in this? It can be relatively cheap to start a podcast, but over time you're probably going to want to invest more money, because the more money you invest, the more time you get back. For example, to me, CoSchedule is totally worth the investment because I don't have to go over to each platform and post when my podcast goes out. So just something to think about. And are you trying to make money off of this? I have an article linked in there about sponsorships and other ways people make money off of podcasts. But of course that comes over time. unless you already have an existing platform with lots of people, you're not going to make like a living off a podcast within like 30 days. If you can, kudos to you, okay? But most people, it takes a while for them to build that audience to then get revenue through sponsorships, affiliates, maybe promoting their coursework, whatever that might be. All right. So also in the article, I talk about Google Docs and Google Sheets. And in here, I have where you can sign up to get access to my interview request form, my prep form, the bio that I put together so I can quickly cut and paste to people, and also my process document. And basically you'll get, when you sign up, you'll get links to all these documents, so then you can add them to your Google Docs and then customize them as you see fit. But it's really just good to be really organized when you are podcasting. It is a game, like a lifesaver. Okay, so in Google Sheets, usually, I have things like expenses that I track there, where I want to be featured. And then I have like a list of interviewees so I can keep track of it. And then for my Google Docs, I have what I was telling you about, the interview request, the prep, the bio, and the process, which I'll give you access to. But Google Sheets and Google Docs I absolutely love because you can access it from anywhere. Also, I give you just like my computer, my foldering set up. So if you want to check that out, you can. And then I talk about the 3 most important places to submit your podcast. So if you really want to get it distributed to a large audience, I say iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. There's other places out there, but most of them just pull from iTunes anyway. But those are the 3 places you definitely want your podcast to be available. And then last but not least, just make sure that you have Google Analytics set up to your site so you know what people are clicking on and how long people are staying on your website. And I use Libsyn hosting, which I'll have a link to in the notes, over at nachesnow.com/startapodcast. And for that, it's really good to see how many people are downloading your episode. So you can, and it'll tell you like day by day how many people are downloading. It doesn't right now at least tell you how long they're listening, but at least you know like that people have downloaded your episode to listen to, which is great. But you want to make sure that you're reaching someone, and you want to see what resonates with your audience. And so those analytics really help. But anyway, all right, that's all, folks. I have links to tutorials over there, relevant articles. I got the WordPress plugins that I use. And I also have hardware and software considerations, and I mark the things that I use. But like I said, just don't take my word for it. Go to all the various articles, make notes, figure out the process that works for you. And then from there, start it. Really, it's just starting. Like, if I listen back to some of my first episodes, especially for Can I Park Here, I'm like, ew. But you know what? We're just starting out. We're figuring out mics. We're figuring out like what our style is, how to talk to people, how to edit. And you know what? It's okay to make mistakes. Like, everything doesn't have to be NPR style and perfect, right? You're really just trying to deliver good content to people. And if you're doing that, you're doing okay. All right. So anyway, I hope you found this somewhat helpful. No, it's not a step-by-step guide, but I at least wanted to kind of go through the things that I had in my article. If you have any questions about podcasting, go over to the article and leave a comment, and I'll answer the questions as best I can in the comment. And if I don't have an answer, I will definitely point you in the right direction. Until next time, see you guys later. Take care. Bye.